Listen, chummer, if you're gonna survive out there, you can't just be any slag off the street. You gotta be handy with the iron and hone your skills with it, if you know what I mean. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamers Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, talking yet again about 5th edition Shadowrun today, going over attributes and skills and how all of that kind of works. And remember, this is just a brief overview meant to be informative and help kind of clear up any misunderstandings that some of you folks might have, especially given that the 5th edition rulebook is not laid out the best way possible and some sections are kind of confusing. But before we get into all those specific details, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there and hit the subscribe button and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. Or, if you're already listed on such a legendary roster of fine folks, then hit the like button and share the video far and wide to help us grow further and farther. And now, with all that said, we'll go ahead and dig into these details. So, when it comes to your attributes and skills, the first things that we need to talk about are the attributes and what they do for you. First, we have body, which covers your physical health and resilience or resisting damage. We have agility, which covers your hand-eye coordination, balance, etc., flexibility, stuff like that. And reaction is your reflexes, awareness, and response time. And strength is, well, your physical strength, your melee damage. Then we go on to your mental stats. We have willpower, which covers your resistances, spellcasting, exhaustion, and the like. Logic, which is your rational thought, your memory, things like that. Intuition, which is best thought of as your instinctive comprehension, that bridging the gap between intuitively understanding something without the need for a great deal of focused thought on a subject. And charisma is your force of personality, your persuasion, your charm, your ability to use your words to get people to do what you want or in line with you. And then going on from there, we have your special attributes. Edge, which everybody has, is your luck. You use this for temporary boosts. You burn edge to gain a boost on certain skills, tests, rolls, or to make a critical glitch not be quite so bad. Then you have essence, which is a measure of just how metahuman you are. This is tied to a couple other stats, charisma, magic, resonance. Speaking of magic and resonance, magic is a measure of how mages or adepts cast their spells, or how well a technomancer can interface with the matrix. As I touched on before, cybernetics and augmentations or replacements will damage and affect your resonance or your essence, and thus affect your magic and resonance and your ability to cast or interface effectively. It also takes away from your charisma because you lose just that little bit of humanity with each bit that you trade away for some kind of an upgrade, and you go from normal, comfortable, relaxed human face and start dipping into the uncanny valley because there's just that little bit off about you. And then we have, finally, initiative, which is a measure of your quickness in combat. This determines your turn in the combat order. Now, with all of those particular attributes out of the way now, we move on to skills. You have skill groups and individual skills and then specializations. For an example, you have close combat as the skill group, which affects your ability to fight in close, whether it's with your bare knuckles, knife, sword, club, whip, whatever kind of exotic weapon you might use in that relative melee distance, it all falls under close combat. Close combat skills tend to be more expensive to develop and buy up. Then you have swords, which is an individual skill, because at the end of the day, a sword is a sword is a sword is a sword. You make sure the edge is aligned, you're using it in one, maybe two hands, and a lot of the body motions are still going to be the same. But then you get down to specialization, like, say, katana. You can specialize with a katana. It's two-handed, relatively short for its weight, curved blade, very well-designed cutting blade, and with the two-handed grip you can get quite a bit of power out of a cut, and because it's a shorter, fairly thicker blade than many other curved swords you might find, it's very forgiving with how well it cuts if your edge alignment is off. But all of these things kind of feed together there, and Group skills are more expensive to develop. Individual combat skills are less expensive, and then specializations even less so, but the trade-off is if you're not using the weapon you're specialized with, you're losing that bonus, and so on and so forth. When it comes to rolling a skill test, you add in the relevant attribute to the skill pool, a total of group, individual, and specializations, and any relevant modifiers, and then you roll all of your d6s. Sticking with our melee example, you add in agility, close combat, swords, and katana, if you're following that. So say you have 4 agility, 3 close combat, 4 swords, and then of course 1 point into katana. Well, the katana specialization, if I remember correctly, provides a +2 bonus, so 2, 4, 3, 4... my brain cannot math properly, but you see how all of that adds up pretty quickly. And so when you roll this pool, 5s and 6s are your hits, 1s are misses. If half of the dice pool you roll comes up as 1s, it's a glitch and you fail. Not terribly or awfully or any kind of disastrously, but it's still a failure. If you come up with 1s and no hits, it's a critical glitch, and then things go very wrong as determined by the GM. Most of your skill tests will have a limit on the number of hits that you're allowed. Going with our combat test example, they will typically be limited by a weapon's accuracy. So if you're using a high-powered rifle, it might have an accuracy of 6 or maybe a 7. So if you have a total of 14 dice in your pool and you come up with 9 hits, you're only allowed to count 7 of those for your test. So you can see how all that kind of works to measure and relatively balance things out. I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense. The amount of accuracy you have is to a certain extent limited by the weapon you're using, but it's not a perfect system. I mean, especially when you think about it in melee, there are some things that might affect how well a melee weapon works, how well balanced it is. Is the edge in line with the handle? Is it a oval or rectangular grip, or is it a perfectly round, smooth grip? Is the blade curved or not? All of that can come together to affect how the weapon feels and handles in your hand, but overall, it's more a matter of experience, practice, and timing that determines how accurate you are with a melee weapon in reality. The weapon itself has a comparatively minimal effect on how well you can hit with it, how accurate it is in a fight, because even an incredibly experienced swordsman can take a crappy sword and do amazing things with it. But that's just a point where reality and balancing things in tabletop just don't always quite mesh very well. But there are things you can do to increase a weapon's accuracy: specialized grips, taking the time and effort to make sure something is made to extremely exacting specifications, lots of other little things individual GMs may allow or disallow. But you have options for boosting that. The only thing it costs are time and nuyen. All those all those bills come due when you're undertaking projects like this. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Have I covered this subject pretty well? Do you feel like you have a fairly accurate understanding as to how this works? Let me know your thoughts and we'll engage in discussion down below. Hit that like or dislike button, and as I said earlier, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and join the rest of us here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.